I hope you all have been enjoying yourselves as much as I have at the annual convening. Is that a yes? Yes? Thank you. Each year, we hear feedback that the conversations and the connections that people make at the annual convening are one of the strongest parts of this gathering. The ideas, the innovation, and the energy that all of you bring are really what make this convening truly a convening of relentless advocates. And folks are really thinking about how they can take what they've learned here back to their home institutions or their systems or their other places of work. And so this afternoon, I'm excited about what's about to happen next on the stage. You're going to hear from individuals who are part of our coalition of impatient reformers and thought leaders. First, you're going to hear from our keynote speaker, followed by a panel of campus presidents and leaders from right here in Indiana. You can read all of their bios in the app of the afternoon speakers. However, it is now my great pleasure to introduce Jamie Merisotis, an internationally recognized leader in higher education, human work, philanthropy, and public policy, and currently the president and CEO of Lumina Foundation since 2008. Please join me in welcoming Jamie Merisotis to the stage.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here with really so many close partners and friends in state leadership roles, and I'm especially pleased to be a part of this convening because the missions of Complete College America and Lumina Foundation have so much in common. You know, we both work to advance ideas and policies to enable more Americans to get the higher education that's critical to our country's future. And we both see the urgency of reimagining higher ed to meet the needs of today's students and today's society. And we both put special focus on reaching those who too often have been left behind. Now, I'm proud of the work that CCA and Lumina have done together in many different ways. Just for example, we've been working to build a network for historically Black community colleges where leaders can come together to identify strategies and policies that will enable institutions to better serve their students. Lumina and CCA have both long pointed out and worked to remedy the systemic inequities, inefficiencies, and unfairness that exist in higher education. More broadly, CCA's influence has been pivotal to the significant gains we've tried to catalyze in our work at Lumina when it comes to higher education attainment. Those gains and the enormous benefits derived from millions more people attaining post-secondary credentials are among the least well understood stories of broad social progress that this nation has achieved in the last decade. We need to keep this progress going because we're clearly living in a time of enormous disruption. We haven't fully escaped the impacts of COVID on higher education in the country at large. Artificial intelligence is advancing with great speed and uncertainty. The devastation of climate change on both property and lives is no longer hypothetical and off in some distant future. It's here today and growing in frequency and severity. The widening war in the Middle East has led to a surge of campus protests as explosive as any that we've seen since the 1960s. And of course, sitting here today in November of 2024, the presidential election signals a major change of direction for the country and for higher education. Now look, it's early yet, but we all know that President-elect Trump's pronouncements on higher education and his prior record from 2017 to 2020 point toward a challenging time ahead for higher education. From the efforts to obliterate DEI and target undocumented students to undoing the student debt relief that's been advanced in recent years to rhetoric about eliminating the Department of Ed and dismantling the accreditation system, there's no shortage of things that will challenge, frustrate, and possibly realign the fundamental relationship of higher education institutions to the federal government. Of course, lest we forget, there were state elections as well. And what we saw in most states was a continuation of the status quo with few changes in leadership. I don't need to tell this audience of the 11 gubernatorial elections, no governor's offices changed hands in terms of party control, and only one state, Michigan, saw a change in party control of a legislative body. Now, much has been written about the intense polarization in our country, including a supposedly inexorable divide in views of higher education among red and blue states. But if I can take liberties with Mark Twain, our own work shows that some of those reports have been greatly exaggerated. For example, Texas, led by Republicans, and Illinois, led by Democrats, are both reevaluating and increasing funding for higher education. Texas recently redesigned how it funds community colleges, while Illinois is taking on how it funds universities. Both states agree that a more equitable distribution of taxpayer dollars across higher education is vital and that more resources are needed to help students earn credentials valued in the workplace. In the 21st century, industries that all states are pursuing, things like renewable energy, AI, chip making, advanced manufacturing, and biologics, all require the kinds of skills, creativity, and problem-solving abilities that come from higher education. So I think everyone in this room will acknowledge that this is a pivotal moment for higher education. My point simply is that this polarization isn't a new challenge, but a more extreme one. Now, I know you share my frustration that at a time when higher education has never been more important for our citizens or our country, we're facing stiff headwinds everywhere we look. And while there was a welcome uptick in enrollment last year, we've struggled again this year. This reflects a longer-term trend where the total number of undergraduates is more than 1 million fewer than it was in 2018 and 2 million fewer than it was in 2012. So we must be clear-eyed about our current challenges. Not only have we seen a long-term enrollment decline, but the fact that there are fewer Americans under the age of 18 makes this trend very difficult to reverse. Throw in a robust job market and the fact that fewer than 2/3 of high school graduates are now going on to college, a percentage well down from a decade ago, and the headwinds become a hurricane. But the biggest concern is that for the first time in American history, many are questioning whether higher education is still worth it. According to a recent Lumina Gallup poll, confidence in higher education is at an all-time low, with only 36% of Americans saying that they have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education. That, my friends, is a 20-point drop from just 8 years ago. Higher education is at a crossroads. It can push back on the critiques that have led to this declining confidence. That certainly makes sense in a number of ways, since many of the criticisms of higher education are often distortions of reality. They're often caricatures of the unique world of elite higher education institutions, where we all know relatively few students actually go to college. The obsession with the elites leaves little room for understanding what's really happening on most of today's college campuses. But higher education also has an opportunity. It can use this moment of extreme stress to pursue genuine, urgently needed, systemic change. Rather than spend all of its energies playing defense and pushing back on what it's against, higher education has an opportunity to say what it's for. Bluntly stated, this means both calling BS on falsehoods about higher ed while also pursuing urgently needed changes. Both of these things are possible. They are not in contradiction, and let me explain in a moment what I mean by that. Let's start first, though, with the facts about why higher education has been and remains a fundamental building block of American greatness. For individuals, the data are clear that a bachelor's degree is still the surest route to the middle class. A study from Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce found that there is still a lifetime gain of $1.2 million for those with bachelor's degrees. Of course, we also know that the benefits of going to college are beyond making more money. Many studies say that today's workers will typically have 10 or more jobs over the course of their lifetimes, and we know that college embeds habits like discipline, curiosity, and critical thinking that give someone a leg up on learning new things. This is true for people who earn any post-secondary credential, a bachelor's degree, an associate degree, a certificate, any credential. The data are also clear that people without education past high school not only earn less than those with some higher education, they also struggle more. They're more prone to depression. They need more government assistance. They pay less in taxes. They divorce more frequently. They vote and volunteer less often. They even live shorter lives. The latest research from Ann Case and Angus Deaton, the Princeton economists who coined the term deaths of despair, reveals that the gap in life expectancy between Americans with college degrees and those without has surged to 8.5 years. We also can't overlook the tremendous societal and national value of higher education. In a recent op-ed in our local newspaper here in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Star, Ball State University economist Michael Hicks points out that the combination of business incentives and cuts to funding of higher education has left Indiana's economy weaker vis-a-vis other states. He concludes very bluntly this way: to put it as plainly as possible, educational attainment alone is now a more powerful predictor of a region's economic success than everything else combined. Let me share one more argument that I've been trying to make in gatherings like this. The economy's shift from high-paying manufacturing jobs to technology-mediated office work requires college education. Office work requiring college education has made life more challenging, broadening the popular appeal of authoritarianism. Look, this is a global phenomenon, and I think even here in the United States, we're now seeing the growing appeal of strict obedience to authority at the expense of personal freedom. Now, we know the solutions. Studies going back decades have shown that higher levels of education make it less likely for people to turn away from democracy. Data from surveys that track authoritarian leanings show that higher levels of education reduce these kinds of beliefs and values. Now, our election results are in line with these findings. College-educated people were far more likely to reject the rhetoric that praises dictators and disdains democracy. Higher education promotes independent thought and inquiry. It exposes people to other cultures and ideas. It can equip people to handle complexity, difference, and rapid societal change. A better educated population, then, is not only essential to individual prosperity, what we've long called the good jobs and good life dividends of education, but also shared prosperity, the strongest bulwark against growing threats to our democratic way of life. So I think we can all agree that when it comes to value, of course higher education is worth it. That's been the case throughout our country's history, and the evidence is overwhelming that it's still the case. But that doesn't mean that the system as it's been for the past century or more is sufficient for what this country needs going forward. High costs have put too many schools out of reach for many Americans. The system is inflexible and hard to understand. College schedules, frankly, often don't work for today's students, more of whom are older, working, many with families of their own. And students are often unsure if their coursework is actually going to prepare them for today's jobs and tomorrow's. Higher ed must be responsive to what society needs, and those needs have evolved in light of global, technological, economic, and social changes. The good news is that we know, you know, that many states are already adapting. Data show that price increases are easing in some cases, and states are expanding scholarships and need-based aid. More states are encouraging schools to look at options like 3-year degree programs rather than the traditional 4-year model. They're looking at non-degree credentials and offering more flexible scheduling to meet the needs of today's learners. More states are creating real financial incentives for schools to partner with businesses to ensure they're teaching in-demand skills and are using things like internships and apprenticeships and stackable credentials and other programs to give their students entree into good jobs. Now, I mentioned the Texas funding increases. Many of you know this bill, HB 8. The legislation focuses on awarding credentials of value, defined as degrees, certificates, or credentials that offer, in the words of the bill, purpose in the economy, value in the labor market, and opportunities for good jobs and meaningful careers. CCA, Lumina, and many other organizations are also putting renewed emphasis on tying degrees and credentials to return on investment, to good jobs, to more opportunities for further education, and to other measures of value. Well, let me single out just 2 other areas that remain at the heart of our mission. First is the importance of continuing to bring an equity lens to this work despite the current backlash against DEI and other such efforts. Again, speaking candidly, you can pretty much tell I'm speaking candidly at this point, we should not leave it to others to define what equity is. There's been a long-standing and widely understood agreement about what equity is. It's about ensuring that everyone has access to resources and opportunities to succeed, including, and in particular, those who've been historically disadvantaged or underrepresented. It acknowledges that people come from different places and have different needs. Equity in education is important because it's aimed at ensuring that the outcomes of learning cannot be predicted based on one's race, ethnicity, income, or geographic location. That enduring definition is in the best interest of everyone, and that's what we need to make clear. We know that for all of the efforts going back decades, gaps in educational attainment have long existed due to historical, social, systemic, and structural factors that continue to persist. Our collective futures depend on bringing off the sidelines the people who too often have been left out. A recent report, again from the Georgetown Center, provides powerful evidence of why this matters. It notes that the proportion of people with degrees increased 6.7 percentage points from 2010 to 2020, and as a result, U.S. workers will earn more than $14 trillion more over the course of their lifetimes. Of course, it's not just the college graduates who will benefit. When people earn more, they spend more, not only on cars and homes and groceries, but on their own communities, through their civic involvement and through their charitable giving. The Georgetown Center's analysis also found that if all racial and ethnic groups reached the same educational levels as white Americans, those groups would see an additional $11 trillion in net lifetime earnings on top of the $14 trillion all graduates will gain. What this means is that we've got to do a better job of designing policies and programs to meet the needs of today's students, especially around things like affordability and academic quality. Programs from the humanities to sciences and specialized technical programs must be made more affordable and built to support students who are more likely to work while in school, provide care for family members, and experience economic insecurity. Programs should be completed in reasonable timeframes, offer scheduling flexibility, and lead to family-sustaining wages. Second, I want to underscore the importance of developing not just productive individuals, but informed, engaged citizens. Now, I mentioned earlier how even the US isn't immune from the appeal of authoritarianism, which is, again, on the rise around the world. Research has shown that education plays a key role in protecting democracy, but in my view, that role has often been understated, undervalued, and underinvested. Our task now is to highlight more clearly the continuing economic and social benefits of higher ed, while also making the case that it's one of our best bets to help protect democracy. Now look, increasing a college attainment alone, it's not going to solve our nation's challenges with cohesion and democratic vitality. That's not my point. But I do think the sector itself can and should do more to play a positive role. There's an opportunity now to build bridges despite the many signs of increased polarization. Among the reform efforts needed in higher education, we must reimagine higher ed's role in preparing people for active, informed citizenship. Now, it's not just about voting, as important as that is. Active citizenship requires us to be truly engaged in our communities and in society. And to support that effort, educators must connect learning with the persistent issues that confront individuals and their communities. That means answering tough questions, including what do people need to learn and experience to prepare them to be better equipped for the human work of today and tomorrow, while also serving as engaged and active citizens? How do we respond to the torrents of misinformation in ways that allow us to work across our differences? How can we reckon with America's troubled past and present, particularly as it relates to race, ethnicity, income, and geography, while also working towards a brighter future? And how can we show young Americans that education can equip them to have a real impact on the problems that they see around them? At the end of the day, we need to make clear, as I said earlier, what higher education is for, not just what it is against. Thinking about why higher education is so valuable and what it's truly for points us in the right direction. It can lead us to the most productive responses at a time when those responses are so desperately needing. Advancing American talent through a robust system of higher education is the best pathway to individual and shared economic prosperity. Graduates equipped with 21st century skills and immersive experiences in problem solving, communication, digital literacy, critical thinking, teamwork, and other foundational skills, they have higher wages. They also are the best contributors to their communities and are the best defenders of freedom and democracy. Even more than in past gatherings, I think that is our leadership moment right now, a time for creativity, for new approaches, a time when we need to think of strategy, not in terms of either or, but in terms of both and. So thank you all very much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to the comments following with the panel. Thank you very much.
Please watch the side screens for a message from United States Representative Andre Carson of Indiana.
Hello, this is Congressman Andre Carson. Welcome to the CCA's annual convening. The CCA is restoring the promise of higher education. And thanks to your work, Indiana saw a 30% increase in bachelor, associate's, and certificate attainment. That's huge. You all continue to make your mark around this great country. Higher education is a pathway to opportunities for everyone, and we should have access to those opportunities. I want to thank you for your commitment toward equity and a stronger and brighter future. All the best.